than $4 a gallon. Yet the Iranians have denied that they're even negotiating with us anymore, saying instead that they plan to wait out the president's term and negotiate with whoever follows. No doubt they're hoping for a Democrat, the kind who knows how to bend the knee to the mullahs. There have also been reports of devastatingly low munition stockpiles, possibly tying the president's hands on how he can even approach Iran. So how does the president get out of this pickle and help his party keep the House or at least the Senate come November? Here to discuss, Republican Representative from Kansas, Schmidt. Congressman, thank you so much for being here. The way that I see it is that the president has two very noble goals, but they're in conflict with each other. He's got this foreign policy goal of preventing Iran from being able to kill us and our children and our grandchildren with a nuclear weapon. And then he's got his domestic goals of bringing down the cost of gas and bringing down costs more generally, which is really top of mind for voters. The problem is that engagement with Iran raises costs at home, and Iran has proven to be quite a formidable foe. What is the answer? How does he get out of this pickle?
One thing Iran has managed to do is play American public discourse very effectively. A lot of the messaging that we see in sort of the national discourse in a lot of the media online, it's either false or if it has a kernel of truth, it is woefully spun in favor of Iran. I mean, ask yourself this if you're an American. At this point, would you trade positions with the leadership in Tehran? Of course. We are clearly coming out on the strong end of this conflict. And I think the president's instincts are correct. It is critical for America's long-term future, for all of our safety, that Iran not become a nuclear-capable power that has the ability to deliver a fissile payload outside of its borders. We know during the course of this conflict, we've learned that they had more of a capacity on that than even we thought going forward. Remember, it was a flash-in-the-pan news maybe, I don't know, 6, 8 weeks ago, but it was when the Iranians launched mid-range missiles toward Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean after all of the publicly available intelligence suggested they didn't have missiles of that range. And you know what? When you launch a missile with a conventional warhead at a small island in the Pacific and you miss, you get a big splash. You launch that same missile with fissile material at, say, 50,000 American troops in Eastern Europe, and terrible, terrible things happen. So the president's instincts on ending this threat were strong. I think he has to stand strong on that point, and it would help if we would stand in strong behind him so that the Iranians don't get a propaganda victory and don't get the sense that if they just hold fast long enough, Americans will end this to their benefit.
Now, you're on the Armed Services Committee. What is the truth about the state of our stockpiles?
Look, we've used a lot of munitions. There's no doubt about that. I don't think it takes some sort of great insight to figure that out. But it's also not true that we are sort of nearing the last armament. You know, part of the reporting on this, again, not blaming the folks that report, but the folks that have spun this message up. It's true we've used a lot of precision munitions, standoff munitions. We used a very large number of those early in the war. That's typical because before you control the airspace, you don't want to have piloted planes flying over where they're in great risk. So you use standoff munitions in large numbers. You take out their air defense capacity. We're well past that now. And so while we're still using some of those munitions, and that's what's been talked about that in the defensive interceptors predominantly, most of what we are now delivering when we're delivering, it's not that. It's much more traditional munitions that we have very large stockpiles of. So have we used them? Sure. Do we need to replenish them? Absolutely. Does this somehow suggest that we're in a position of weakness? No.
That's great to hear. Another big headline that came out this week was that there's a morale problem in terms of our sailors and our armed service members in the Middle East. We had a headline, Sailor Mental Strain Peaks aboard the USS Lincoln. Family members are reporting that they're hearing from sailors about food being bad, plumbing being, destroyed, not being able to get things like toiletries, et cetera. Some of this is, of course, par for the course when you're on a long deployment. Is there any truth to these claims, and what is the administration's response, or should be their response?
Well, there are always folks who are, concerned, distressed during deployment. There's no doubt that this has been stressful on many families and many service personnel. That's to be expected, and I'm sure it's real. I think at the same time, it's important to keep a bit of perspective on all of this. This is not, at this point, it doesn't appear to be a large number of our sailors, our personnel, our Marines who are expressing these concerns. If there are problems, they need to be found, identified, and fixed, period, full stop. But it's not reason to think that in some way, sort of writ large, our troops aren't being supported while they're deployed. Can we do better? Absolutely. Do we need to follow up on this? You bet. But should this be cause for concern, sort of on the top line, that America's military is somehow not being supported or not up to the task? Absolutely not.
You're also on the Small Businesses Committee. I know that you spend a lot of time talking to your constituencies out there, hearing from people about the things they're struggling with. I'm sure you're hearing from people who are struggling as small business owners, but also just families, working class, middle class families struggling with inflation. What is the Republicans' plan to help those families with the cost of living, especially leading into November?
Yeah, I mean, it is, there are some folks doing very well. I don't mean like the sort of billionaires very well that become the talking points, but just, I've talked with a lot of small businesses, families, farm and ranch operations, especially the last 3 weeks as I've been home and in eastern Kansas. And there are a lot of people that are doing well, but there also are people who are not. And we need to make sure that both of those voices are represented. I tell you what, there's kind of an instinct, and we saw 4 years of it under the prior administration, that whenever you have folks that you want to help, they need to be doing better. The instinct is for government to do more and spend more. And that's part of how we got into this financial mess that we're still trying to unwind. I don't think that's the right instinct. I think staying on point, tax relief, regulatory relief, the things we've been able to do, trying to make sure the safety net functions, but that is truly a safety net and not sort of a broad sort of set of government programs that wind up being utilized by a lot of people that either weren't intended to be helped, or in the more extreme cases, just fraudulent. They don't exist, like examples we've seen in Minnesota and that sort of thing. But I'll tell you what, Batchy, bottom line, I think all of us would be prudent if we sort of hearken back to the last presidential election about 2 years ago. We need to be in the mindset more of the Donald Trump who was driving the garbage truck and who was working the McDonald's window, and a little bit less in the mindset of the political class and the consultants that are poll testing everything. Connection, empathy, listening, responding really matters. The president got that right 2 years ago, and we all need to take a lesson from that.
That is just very beautifully put. Congressman Derek Schmidt from the great state of